Good morning. This is Mark Fowler, and this is our podcast, Always Creating Value. This is the premier one. I just a little introduce myself. I'm a business reengineering professional. I'm also a CPA in inactive status, which means I don't do tax returns and financial statements. And I'm the president of Stowe Management Corporation and the CEO of a training company called Revolutionary Conversations, based on an award-winning book called Revolutionary Conversations: The Tools You Need for the Success You Want. Today, we're going to be talking with Devon Blaine, and the topic, which is also the topic of our podcast, is always creating value. I've known Devon for a long time. She's the president of her the Blaine Group, which is as she says, a total communications agency. And she's known as the entrepreneur's entrepreneur. And I'm pretty sure she's gonna tell us a lot about that as well. Why always creating value? Well, in my business, which is building and rebuilding companies, we've got to focus on, in many ways, the tangible and the intangible, sometimes more the intangible than the tangible, in helping companies reach a situation where they can go to one or more levels above where they are in order to achieve the things that they've looked for all their life, or maybe they're in a lot of trouble. But the thing we have to do, and as Devon I know does as well, is begin to understand what things need to come out in a way that helps add value not only to the customer or the clients or the community, but the business itself, and in particular the employees, because in many ways they are the secret sauce to most businesses. So over the next, 5-10 years that we're going to be doing this, we're going to be looking forward to talking to other professionals, other CEOs, doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, people who are going to be talking about how they create value in their own businesses and their own communities. Devon, one of the things that we cross over on is that you have many, many areas of services, obviously reaching out to people in different ways, but we're both in the crisis management business. And that's one of the reasons why I reached out to you, because we know what it's like to deal with situations where people are looking at the dark wall or the disaster that they think they're in. So, Devon Blaine, how are you?
I am well. Thank you for asking me to join you this morning, Mark. It's truly a pleasure.
Thank you. Could you expand on all the things you do? I know I have your resume, and not your resume, but your website, where it talks about crisis management, it talks about marketing, it talks about community service, community areas. I know you do a good deal of work in the area of nonprofits. Matter of fact, I think you mentioned something about a nonprofit that you're working with recently. It's your ability to reach into them and be able to help them reach out to all the people they need to reach out to as well.
Well, let me answer you by saying that the commonality all of our clients share, whether they're a fast-track emerging growth company or one that wants to be, or a nonprofit, or an author launching their new book, or a crisis situation, they are all people who are absolutely passionate about what they're doing. And that's what I love about what I do every day. I probably would have made a lot more money and had a lot less fun working with Fortune 100 companies. But I'd far rather work with entrepreneurs and other creators, and in the case of nonprofits, I guess you can say do-gooders.
Do-gooder. How did you get the Entrepreneur of Entrepreneurs designation?
It's been so long that I've been using that. I'm not sure where I coined that. I think one of my copywriters came up with that, actually.
Oh, how do you apply? It sounds very charismatic almost, that you're leading people who are leading others in opening doors and opening windows and doing, amazing things.
Well, I'm an entrepreneur and we work with entrepreneurs.
Uh-huh.
And that's a very different mindset. And it's one I'm cognizant of when I interview prospective employees. We need to be able to turn on a dime because our clients do that. And if you're uncomfortable in that environment, it's never going to be a fit, no matter what the skill level is.
Well, that reminds me of the creating value concept that we're talking about today. And first of all, I was wondering whether you could, because I'm going to backtrack to what you're talking about, the entrepreneur, but how do you define creating value in your own business? And the reason I'm asking the question is obviously what we need to talk about. But when you were talking about making sure that the people you're interviewing can turn on a dime, that's got to be a value proposition in itself.
It is, and it's just necessary in everyday implementation. I think that's part of how we provide value to our clients, but it is also being able to think 1, 2, 3, 10 steps ahead for what they're going to need. I called a client on the way to the office this morning who had called asking a question yesterday. Well, the answer was simply to Google it. But I called him with the answer this morning because I know it's important to him. And I know that having that answer so quickly for him is also important. And a lot of it is just anticipation.
Anticipation? Meaning?
Anticipation, meaning thinking through what the next steps are, where is someone headed, and how best to get them there.
Now, what I'm thinking is, can we get I've had a lot of questions up from just the little bit we've been talking come to my head, and when you're mapping out something for them, I would imagine it changes just like we do, because we're in a crisis situation. Course correction is always the most important thing we're thinking about is course correcting and being able to make those course corrections. I never thought about that as a value opportunity, but I guess it is. Could you expand on that a bit?
Well, I can give you a couple of examples.
Oh, wow, good.
So many years ago, we were working with a nonprofit that did a 6-weekend outdoors event every year.
Oh, wow.
And this was the first year we were engaged. And the Wednesday before their Saturday opening, there was torrential rain. So much so that they were going to be unable to open on Saturday. The parking lot was too muddy for cars to park. The vendors could not get their wares to their booths on the site. So how do you tell? Usually opening weekend, 20,000 people would show up.
Wow.
And they bought tickets that were usable any weekend of the event. So how do you tell 20,000 people you cannot contact directly not to show up?
I'm waiting. I'm bated breath here.
Well, we all watch TV news. We see the weather report, correct?
Uh-huh.
The weather report can be planted. We actually had one major network TV station go out to the event site and shoot the mud puddles and use them as a backdrop for the weather report, saying that although it's going to be gorgeous this weekend, this event cannot open on Saturday because of the rain we had the last few days, and here's what the parking lot looks like.
Oh, wow.
So we got way lucky on that. And yes, there was lots of radio news, etc. The good news is that only 200 cars showed up that Saturday.
As opposed to 20,000 people. Wow.
Yes.
Well, there's no luck in that, I would imagine, in the sense that you've created a bunch of value relationship-wise from a network perspective with the news world.
And they loved it, the client, and it was a good story. And that's so everyone thinks that it's the contacts. The contacts help, but it's the having a great story that really makes it work.
Wow. Do you have another? You said you had a couple of them. I'm interested in the next one as well.
We had a client who was putting on an event a number of years ago in the state capitol rotunda, Sacramento, that had recently been redecorated. So that tells you how long ago it was. And there was a small business conference that was being held. They had invited all 200 people attending that conference to a reception to kick it off the night before. They invited all the state legislators, the Assembly and Senate people, the governor. Their economist was speaking. We'd invited press. We had about a dozen acceptances. We had press kits. We had worked with the assemblyman who chaired the small business committee to speak that evening. He had also directed us to a constituent of his where I had ordered the food for the reception. Our client ordered the wine discount from San Francisco. It had to be shipped in Coke and 7-Up cases to be allowed into the state capitol. One of the assemblyman's constituents was providing the wine glasses. The state cafeteria was providing the ice. And the night before, I said, what's going to go wrong? Because something always does in an event. And I thought about it, and I packed accordingly. And when I got to the Capitol and my client arrived, I walked him around, showed him everything. He was pleased. And then I reached into my jacket pocket and I pulled out a corkscrew. And I said, and I possess the sole corkscrew. Do you care to assist? And it was obvious to me that all the duties were so segmented and divided. No one would assume responsibility for a corkscrew. Now, it was real easy to get corkscrews from ledge offices.
That's a good story.
So I urge my team to always be the one who remembers the corkscrew.
That's a great. So from again, we go back to the value proposition is being able to watch not only the back of the client, but watching their back, but also be watching the back of the situation. What's going on? What are the things that can go wrong? And like you said, being able to anticipate what's really going on. And with you're on the examples that you've been given. They're on show examples. They're things that are people are going to see. People are going to be involved. People are going to be disappointed or going to be joyful. And you got to make sure that it always comes out joyful or close to joyful, which is quite an art.
One of our former clients said it best when I asked him for a testimonial for our website. And he said that we always did work that made him happy to write a check to us every month.
Oh, that's good.
And that's what clients are looking for. And that's what all of us need to deliver.
To feel like it's well worth it to write that, like you said, to write that check. Now you mentioned client. What does a perfect client look like? We all have to watch over them, right? And what is a perfect client for you? Because nobody can be completely perfect, but close.
A perfect client is going to be communicative. They're going to, while they are attempting to achieve a great, big, hairy, audacious goal, they also are somewhat realistic. And they're willing, like Marilyn Monroe, to do whatever it takes. And I use Marilyn as an example because when she was a starlet, she would stay at an event until every last photographer got every photo they wanted. She worked it. She earned it. And if you've got a client who, 11 o'clock in the morning, that's too early to do an interview. Can't you make it 1? I want to go to a yoga class. No, if you want to be covered in the press, unless you've got a sales meeting that's critical, or you're in the hospital, or you died, show up. Show up and do a great job.
Well, that was the old quote about what was it? Can't think of it. Always show up. I can't remember what it was. Always show up. The difference between a success. I think it was Woody Allen. That's what it is. Woody Allen. Being successful with girlfriends is always showing up, making sure you show up.
It's true in every avenue of life.
Right. I want to go back, if you could, to that interview, the interview you're having with those potential team members that you have, and making sure that they have either the potential or the already existing skills that meet your particular needs. And it sounds like your particular needs, it's always a value proposition. Like you said, the corkscrew, even the littlest thing can have an enormous value proposition to it. So a little bit more about, how you eyeball or how you feel this person is going to be able to add that unique quality.
It's really difficult to assess all of that. Some of that comes after working with someone. And I have found that through the years, a lot of people automatically eliminate themselves because they realize they can go somewhere else and not work as hard. They're not going to learn anything, but they'll put in their time, they'll get a check, and that's fine with them. Although those are not the right people for me. I need people who are invested and excited.
Well, I understand. I have I go back over the years that I've done this work, and when we go into companies, we have to quickly evaluate people, and the people who step forward are the ones you want. The ones that don't step forward are the ones you don't want. So I understand.
Yeah, totally.
But people who are going to be seeing this podcast, I would imagine many of them would like to know a little more about, from an intuitive perspective, as to how you kind of understand who's got that kick, that interest in being part of an organization that's as proactive as your organization is. And I think most employers want proactive people.
It's not totally intuitive. Some of body language. Or does someone lean forward in the chair as you talk to them? Or are they slumped? I've had other people who had such bright, shiny, sparkling eyes, such enthusiasm, that they appeared to be someone who would be a great fit. And then sometimes someone who was just very bright, very solid, very dependable, and really smart is also perfect. But
They don't have to be.
that's not as immediately obvious.
Right. How do you go? How do you go about training some of these people in being able to anticipate? So many people in the world are looking for somebody's else, an answer from somebody, an answer from, they want the boss to tell them what to do, as opposed to anticipating for the boss. And I don't want to use the word boss, but the team leader or whatever. And, how do you help anticipate them learn how to begin to anticipate? Because so much of our education is about being told what to think, or, this is the way, and not really being able to take about 3 or 4 different things and shake them up and come up with something new. So how do you help them do that?
Just conversation, including them in the planning and what we're doing and why, and what may change and why. And in PR, priorities are constantly shifting.
It's like making movies. I've never made a movie, but I can imagine making movies.
And it's exactly what you do when you go into a company that has challenges.
Uh-huh.
You never know which hole needs to get plugged next.
Well, yes, it's a secret. Yeah, I don't know. Secret sauce is not the right word, but you've got to ascertain who not power people, but the people who are going to add value, the people who are going to raise, they're going to raise their hand, not by just raising their hand, but by getting something done. Let's talk a little bit more about what you do, because I want the audience people who read this, listen to this, or possibly read it if we get it transcribed. What are some of the things you do that allow you, in addition to getting something done, but also add value to them? What are some of the kinds of jobs that in the crisis work, for instance? You've mentioned 2 or 3 things as it related to the presentation, but in the crisis area where people are all of a sudden being confronted with, even the community may have found out about who that they're in trouble, or the government has found them out to be trouble, the city has found them to be in trouble and stuff. How do you deal? I mean, what do you do in this area to help buffer them?
Well, the first thing we do is learn everything we can possibly learn about the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And assess where things really are. I find that when a small company is threatened, the CEO is always scared to death that they're going to lose the company.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, things don't blow up. They never get that bad. We got involved, I'm going to say it was about 10 years ago, maybe 11, with the pet food recall. Our client ended up to be a small Las Vegas importer of ingredients. They imported from China. They brought the bags into their warehouse and shipped them out to their Fortune 100 company clients. They never opened them. They never examined them. Wasn't done in the industry in those days. It turned out that our client was the source of tainted wheat gluten that was causing all the dogs to die from pet food from all the major companies, and all the companies had to issue recalls. When the FDA gets involved, they clear the press releases and they go out through Associated Press in Washington, D.C. And FDA posts it on their website. And in this case, all the concerned dog owners were calling my office. Meanwhile, I was dealing with the press because my staff is so accustomed to attempting to get coverage And in this case, we didn't want it. So I'm better at saying, oh, we really don't have a spokesperson you can talk to. There is a statement I can provide. Oh, with that statement you're not going to cover? I am so sorry. And that turns out to be much better. The press was so fair to our client. And I'm not sure what happened, because after 2 weeks, the client's wife was concerned, because our fees for crisis work are not inexpensive. She was concerned the company would not make a profit that year. I was more concerned that they stay in business. But she convinced her husband that we should be terminated. So I had heard they were continuing, but I also saw a newspaper article that the CEO he had an opportunity to address a federal grand jury. And being the only American on the list, products were imported from China. If they needed a fall person, I feared that the 37 years for the 34 counts would fall to him. Yes.
Wow, and what a risk that was. Whoa.
I don't think there was any collusion at all. I think he was purely innocent and caught in the middle.
Well, it's too bad you couldn't have continued to help him.
Yes.
How is, not only from a value proposition perspective, but from just a dynamics perspective, how is PR, if that's what I can use, how has PR changed over the last couple, in the last 5-10 years from a historic perspective? And, I would imagine for you, it changes depending on clients, but it also probably with social media and all the other things happening, going on. What are some of the high points of public relations that you have to deal with?
Well, things continue to change all the time. What's newsworthy changes. Since the pandemic, what's newsworthy has changed. The news cycles are shorter than they ever used to be. So you really have to be on top of what's going on in the news to be able to pitch effectively. That said, a lot of people think social media totally changed it. It did and it didn't. It's just one more venue. So TV is still important, radio is still important, podcasts are humongously important. There's a lot of online publications, and social media needs to be included in that mix. I had the opportunity years ago to speak at a technology incubator. And so many of the tech startup companies think that all they need are a lot of Facebook friends or to be linked in with a lot of people. That doesn't validate their technology. A professional investor will look at a trade journal article that talks about a technology as being way more credible. That's important to them. Even more important is that the company is a customer or two.
So you're constantly looking for the receptivity, the point that is most important for that particular. There's in the valuation business is called willing buyer, willing seller. In many ways, this is a willing buyer, willing seller. You're looking for those people that are going to be most interested in that particular part of it, and not only doing a much more broad-based public relations approach. Correct?
Correct. And then there's lots of opportunities to take advantage of. This happens to be World Alzheimer's Month. And we're working with a company that just launched a product line of simple technology products that caregivers use to make their job easier. And there's research that shows that if you have a paid caregiver for a family member who's ill, you can save $3,000 to $6,000 a year using some of these products.
And probably that means a lot to many of the people that are taking care of those people. Yeah.
And if you're the one taking care of a family member, it just makes your life easier and gives the person who perhaps has Alzheimer's, perhaps has some other disease, it makes their life more livable, gives them more control so they feel better about themselves.
So how do you reach out to the person who's so busy they don't even know that they could find a product like this?
Well, in this case, we reach out to the press and let them do that job for us through trade journals, through standard newspapers and magazines, online, podcasts, radio talk shows, TV news. Because everyone reads something, everyone listens to something. And we just saturate.
You say saturate? Saturate. So how many different avenues do you normally reach out to?
It depends on the client. It depends on their target market. It depends. In this case, the products are launching at CVS.com and in 500 CVS stores nationwide.
Uh-huh.
So mega reach. So we're targeting nationally, probably 1,000 or more outlets.
Congratulations. That's amazing. It sounds like you've had some amazing home runs here, and at the same time, you sound like you get on base a lot. It sounds like you do a really fabulous job. Is there anyone in particular that's you're very proud of that jumps out at you?
One of our existing clients, such a wonderful person and such an accomplished person as well. Marty Cooper invented the cell phone.
Oh, okay.
And if that's not astounding enough, and I think he made the first public cell phone call when he was around 45.
Uh-huh.
It took 10 years to commercialize it. He was with Motorola at the time. Went on to become a serial entrepreneur. He's 92 today and still every bit as curious as he was as a 6-year-old when he dreamt of people talking on phones without wires. And his next mission, and he wrote a book that we're handling, and he was on CBS Sunday Morning recently. He wants to be the first person to make a cell phone call from space.
Oh my God. At 90. Whoa.
And he tells me that technologically it is possible. It will require separate radio equipment.
So is he going to talk to Mr. Bezos? Is that what it is?
He first applied at Virgin Galactica.
Uh-huh.
Their doctor is in contact with him because they're, of course, concerned about his age. He's probably in better health than all the rest of us. So that probably will not be a non-issue, but he is talking to the other companies as well.
That's amazing. That's an ongoing relationship. It isn't just a one-off. That's for sure. That's
and by the way, his book was optioned by Dana Brunelli, who made the social network. I can't think of a better person to bring that story to screen.
Oh, wow. Is it going to be a documentary or is it
yet to be determined. I would anticipate it would be a major feature.
Cool. That everybody would want to know about a person like that. That's amazing.
Well, and not just him. There was a whole lot of drama between Motorola and Bell Labs and the Federal Communications Commission. They made the prototype for that first cell phone in 3 months.
In 3 months?
In 3 months. They had to have it ready for a particular hearing, or Bell Labs would forever have controlled the airways.
Always a race, huh?
Mm-hmm.
When you're probably spending a little time catching up to a client like that, okay, who's always thinking and always thinking. You spend always, huh?
That's his favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I imagine. Keep you on your feet. But a lot of clients aren't quite as dynamic. They're not quite as thoughtful and inventive and whatever. So how do you go about helping clients kick into, the things that they need to be inspired by to, we can sit down and from an advisory perspective, we can help people, come up with ideas, but oftentimes it becomes art. We're the ones doing that creativity. But what do you do to help them begin to get that inspirational kick themselves?
What I always do when I meet with a prospect is take a good look at where they are today and where do they want to go. And then how do they get from A to B? And that can become a really fun dialogue where they start thinking and contributing. And we can chime in along the way. And some ideas get rejected, some stick. And of course, it keeps changing on the way.
One of the issues that I've always had is, we go in and we stir up the pot and we solve a lot of problems, get doors open, create, larger horizons for people, and things are better. But keeping them creating value is one of the hardest things. Is to sometimes it's from the longer term perspectives. Your 90-year-old friend doesn't have that issue, but I found a lot of people relax once things have been over. A lot of them relax. They just say, "We've arrived. That was great. Everything's going to be fine," and whatever.
That actually was a comment that he made, that companies can become complacent with their success when they really need to continue to evolve. And that's why a lot of companies are no more.
Yeah, that's for me the death. We've arrived is one of the biggest philosophical attitudes or emotional connections to whatever. We can open this up to, we've got a couple of people here that would maybe like to ask you some questions. Do you think we can do that?
It's fine with me.
Anybody like to ask a question? I haven't checked my chat here. How about Lanny and Bear, or Jerry, or Ann, or James? We can just keep talking. We can keep talking.
You want to unmute them, James? Yeah, it was interesting when you were talking about the pet food, Devon. When I was president of a division for Hallmark,
Everyone can unmute themselves, by the way.
We made a product, a dog that no one wanted to buy. Not that had never happened, but it had happened. No one wanted this dog, but all the stores, the Hallmark Gold Crown stores, had purchased it. And the owners could not sell the dog. It was a dog. The dog was a dog. And so evidently, a few of the owners tossed these dogs into the garbage outside of the store. And I don't know how or why, but some news person in Las Vegas, where Hallmark owns all the stores, took a picture inside of a dumpster.
Wow.
And it was filled with stuffed animals, but you can imagine what that photo looked like. Just a dumpster full of dogs that were tossed that didn't sell. And it became my job to be interviewed to challenge the scam of the stuffed animal dog being dumped in the dumpster. What would you have advised me to do in that interview?
What kinds of questions were you getting, Anne?
I was getting, the questions I was getting was the waste, the why weren't these given to orphanages, what was, it was all about tainting, if they could, Hallmark's reputation.
Well, to begin with, Hallmark did not fill the dumpster. Hallmark customers filled the dumpster. It also seems like it was a dreadfully slow news day in Las Vegas.
You are so right. Where I went with it, and I really appreciate your answer because it validates my fumbling around with an answer that said, that's why we're not a franchise. We are a collection of independent owners, and our owners are independent to do with their product that which they think they need to do. And while that image looks very bad on your newspaper, it was a way of getting that product space available to sell product that people were more interested in.
So this was the newspaper in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And they love to hate local companies.
They really
That's additional for them.
And they love to do a gotcha in print, and they take. Yeah. Talk about that. They in print, they take what you say and they retool it, and you can't defend.
There are a few local newspapers who like to do that, and I've never understood why they want to bash local companies. Makes absolutely no sense. And there's really nothing you can do about a comment that's taken out of context. The best thing to do is to keep answers short and simple. I was doing a crisis media training recently, and the key person came up with a great phrase. This was an isolated incident. Beautifully stated. It sounds like you handled the situation really well, too. And never say no comment. It looks like you're hiding something. I don't allow our clients to ever say that. They can say, I don't know, I'll get back to you. Because that looks like you're on top of the situation, but you just don't have that particular information.
Well, in doing that, again, I would go back to the value aspect. The difference between saying no comment and at least engaging is a value is a value thing. You're continuing to maintain the value. You're still going to be there. It's like the Maryland situation. Yes. She was always there, and Anne didn't run away. You're client that you're talking about. It was an isolated situation. We're here. We're not running away from this situation at all. We're standing our ground, which is defines your own personal value and corporate value.
And in Ann's situation, the president asking the wrong person. They should have been asking the store owner. And yes, gifting those stuffed animals to orphanages, to children's hospitals, anything like that would have been fabulous.
Yeah, especially when they had a photographer there, especially if you had a camera crew there, that would have, we're going to stand by our product no matter what, Devon, I'm thinking, one of the reasons I started this particular podcast is it's consistent with some of the things that we've done over the years. I've always taught for Cal CPA, California Society of CPAs, and Education Foundation. I taught many, many years at UCLA Extension, and we used to have a in-house newsletter that went out to 5,000 to 10,000 people 5 or 6 times a year, and it was always about the importance of what successful and innovative people have to say and making sure it comes, it gets out there. And I'm just thinking that, as we kind of come to the end of this, that, if you're thinking about your new customers, your existing customers, or people that I'd be working with, or anybody else that sees this, what do you want them to know most about creating value for their business?
I want them to look through the eyes of their customers and figure out how to provide what those customers need. There are way too many entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs who create a product. They're sure people want it. They're sure people will pay whatever they want to charge for it. But they've never stopped to do any market research. And yes, market research can be expensive, but it's more expensive to launch a product that doesn't sell and have to start over. So I always urge start the right way.
I agree with what you're saying, and I often think about I wish I could think of an example, but there's so many little things in life that I think about. Why did I have to work so hard at that little piece of equipment that I just did? Or why do I have to dial it this way? Or has anybody ever invented this, ever tried this product out? It's like so many times, and so many products actually that we actually have to use because we need to use them, but who thought of this way to do it? Who thought of the way to do this? It's like, so it's almost pandemic in its own little way, that people do not take the time to reach back into the situation and understand what people are experiencing.
Or have a good help desk.
Have what?
Or have a good help desk.
Yes.
Our client with the simple technology products for seniors, they don't want any product to ever be returned. So if you have trouble setting it up, you call their help desk, they'll walk you through it. And it really is simple. It's not like what we think of technology being.
Right. Well, that's wonderful. And do they... and what does the customer say about what the experience of having to be walked through the process?
So far, it's worked well. They've had almost 0 returns. And one of their products is called Reminder Rosie.
Reminder Rosie?
Reminder Rosie.
Yeah.
You could, let's say you have an ill parent, and you can record up to 25 messages saying, after lunch, take 3 white pills. Or in an hour, it's time for your walk with Laura. So they hear your voice, which is comforting to them and familiar. You don't have to remind them because Rosie's doing it for you. And it makes them feel better. It takes some stress off of you. And they're finding that it works remarkably well, has increased medication compliance in those who had compliance issues. It's increased compliance 86%.
Oh, wow. It's a little doll-like thing or something?
It's a clock.
Oh, it's a clock. Interesting. I haven't got my watch on. Ann, do you have it? What time is it?
We have about 10 minutes left. And honestly,
Cool.
I was saving myself for the last because I feel like the least qualified to ask a question of someone with your
Okay, good.
gravitas. But I couldn't help, because I've never gone out and killed squirrels to feed my family. It's always been business. So I do have an inherent interest in what you guys are discussing. Thanks. But what really hooked me was when you talked about that moment of truth when the client has that payment moment, and that's where your service is either valued or felt as an expense. And it seems like you work with a lot of large clients. I wonder if they ever get so large that they're not under the influence of that payment moment. I know you bill a big rate, but I'm just wondering if they get so far removed.
That's a really interesting question. And years ago, one of my account execs, when we signed a Craig McCaw company, and he said, they'll be with us for years, doesn't matter what we do. At the time, Craig McCaw had just taken this company public and raised $6 billion.
Wow.
We were in place for 3 years. And that's not our typical client, by the way. We were brought in because they were marketing to small and mid-sized companies, and that's a particular expertise of ours. 3 years later, a turnaround person was brought in. All vendors were terminated, including us. But for those 3 years, what we did, what we were paid was never questioned. Doesn't mean we didn't work hard at adding value. It's a very different mindset.
Well, my father was an entrepreneur, and he was a Harvard business graduate, and I used to have conflicts all the time with people who I felt were getting more credit than me and all this within a marketing company I worked at. And he said, don't worry about that. He said, the person who pays the bill knows who's creating value. Do you find that that's true, or that maybe isn't true these days?
I think typically that person does know, unless someone else has their ear and is lying to them. And I've experienced that too.
You guys talked about, do you mind if I fire hose you with questions? No one else seems to be taking it. Okay. Nope. We have a few minutes left, and then I'm going to let Mark, well, actually, I have 2 more minutes, and then Mark needs to wrap it up. But you guys talked about showing up, being part of it, just showing up. And we had a client that was talking about how you show up the other day. And that kind of confused me, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that. It seems to be something that's entering the mindset of leadership, and that is the quality of how you show up. And I'm not sure I understand exactly what that means.
I'm not sure I understand totally either.
I was afraid of that. I hope maybe Ann can help me.
I'll chime in, and then Mark, please add your thoughts to this too. I think it's important to show up professionally, show up open and humble, not arrogant, and do whatever you can do to help the situation.
It's so easy to say just show up. And James, I agree with Devon right on it, describing that. But I think you're right. You got to be open. But in order to be reminded internally, you've got to have a sense. You've got to have a sense of the need. In other words, you've got to understand that somebody else needs you. One of the things that I often found difficult is helping team members remember that not only is the boss supposed to be helping you, you're supposed to be helping the boss. And sometimes it's this person that you work for. Yes, you work for them, but at the same time, it isn't all about you. It's about them. If you want them to be able to be there for you, you've got to be there for them. And I've had 3-hour retreats that dealt with, reaching upward and being there and actually showing up for your own boss, for the person who is basically taking care of you. So that's one other dynamic to think about.
So well expressed, Mark. Here.
Thank you, man. Thank you. But I agree. I want to go back to Devon's, being present. It's, being present doesn't mean that you have that answer. Being present is there, like what Devon said, the situation. You're there to be part of the situation. You're not there to be the hero. You're not there, even though you might be the hero, but it's being present, which means that you don't have your little laundry list to tell people what they're need to do. So.
Well, not to keep dragging it on, because I know you have to wrap it up, but it just reminded me, it really brought home the title of the podcast. And that is that, like, I have a responsibility for seeing where I can create value, not just waiting for my boss or the other stakeholders to tell me what I need to do, but I actually have a responsibility as well in that relationship.
I give you an attaboy on that one. And
that's what I was looking for, Mark, was an attaboy.
Attaperson.
And Mark, I know we're out of time for today, but sometime I would love to have a conversation with you.
Sure, I'd love to. We haven't had lunch together in a long time. So.
No, we haven't. And some of which you do in helping companies out of their issues. And there, a lot of times the PR aspects can help get them out faster. So
absolutely.
I would love to explore how that can work synergistically.
I would too. Thank you. Devon, thank you for doing this. This was, we've talked about this about a year ago.
We did.
And this is
thrilled to have been here.
Thank you all for listening today. I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed this. I learned an awful lot. I've known Devon for a long time, and it's amazing some of the things you learn from people that you know forever, and you never knew that. And it's been fun, and I hope you get an opportunity to see our other podcast coming, where we do it once a month, the second Wednesday of every month. It's always about creating value. It's about learning from all kinds of different people. And Devon, thank you so much for doing this. And maybe we'll have you back again. I would love to have you back again.
Thank you so much, Mark. It truly was my honor to be here.